guys, so today in math we're starting our new chapter. Well, I guess technically we started it yesterday, but we're on lesson 1 of our new chapter, and this chapter is all about measurement. So what you need out first, you need out your anchor chart. That's called Reading a Ruler. It should be in your Wednesday packet. It looks like this. And you need that clear ruler that I gave you in your packet. Or I think 1 or 2 of you already said that you had a clear ruler. So you need that clear ruler out. Now you may be wondering, I have plenty of rulers at home, but they're not clear. Why do I have to use the clear one? Well, because for this lesson, when you measure things, it's really helpful if you can see through the ruler. Because then you can just place it right across the middle. You can see where it begins and where it ends. It just makes things easier. So right now you should have this anchor chart out. I also have it on the board because we need to talk a little bit about reading a ruler. Now this may be a review for some of you, probably most of you, but let's just go over it. Just because we definitely haven't used a ruler all year, and it may have been a while since you used one before. So we are only going to be working with inches on this ruler in this chapter. We will not be worrying about centimeters until the next chapter. So we're not worried about that. Remember, inches are at the top. Well, I guess they are the larger pieces. So this side is the inches side. So this is what we're going to be looking at. We're not going to be looking at the centimeters. We're just going to be looking at inches. It has inch right here to help you. So when we have a ruler, we normally have our 0 right here, and then there's a little bit of space between the edge of the ruler and the 0. When we measure with a ruler, we do not start at the edge of the ruler. We find the 0 and start there. Now the whole inch is this whole thing. The 0 to 1 is a whole inch. The 1 to the 2 is a whole inch. The 2 to the 3 is a whole inch. The 3 to the 4 is a whole inch, and so on. And in between, we have all of these little marks. Now, it says find the whole inch and find the quarter inch, and then we're also going to be talking about half inches. These longer tick marks that are between each whole number. So we have 1 between the 0 and the 1, 1 between the 1 and the 2, we have 1 between the 2 and the 3, 1 between the 3 and the 4, and if you look at your ruler, you have more. They are those long ones that go right down the middle. That is the half-inch mark. Because if we look at this and we imagine a whole inch, well, here we have 0, and here we have 1. So each whole inch has a quarter inch, a half inch, and a 3/4 inch. You can tell because on most of your rulers, each of those tick marks between the holes are the same size. So, let's see. I'll hold this up close. And you can see there's a quarter inch, a half inch, 3/4 inch between the 0 and the 1. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. We're going to be looking at those longer ones, not the little tiny ones between. So in between each whole inch, you see 3 longer tick marks that are not labeled. That is the 1/4 inch, the half an inch, and the 3/4 inch marks. So let's imagine that we're measuring this rectangle. Well, we started at the 0, and then we want to figure out how many whole inches. So how many of these whole numbers does it pass? Well, it passes 1, so it's definitely at least 1 inch. And it passes 2, so it's definitely at least 2 inches, but it doesn't reach all the way to the 3-inch mark. So we know that our whole number has to be 2, because there are 2 whole inches. And then we need to figure out how many into the third there are. Well, here's our quarter-inch mark, our half-inch mark, and our 3/4 inch mark. And we can see, so we can imagine 1/4, 1/2, and 3/4, and we can see that it ends right at this 3/4 mark. So that means we have 2 whole inches, and then 3/4 of another inch. So that means in all, this rectangle is 2 whole inches, and then 3/4 of a 1/3 inch. So we would say this rectangle is 2 3/4 inches long. Okay, if you have any questions about how to read a ruler, make sure to reach out to me later today. Go ahead and put the anchor chart to the side, because now we are going to get into this chapter. Okay, let's read the sentences underneath the title together before we begin. Length is the measurement of a line between 2 points. So here we have a line that is between 2 points. So point A and point B. Length is how long this line is. We use inches, feet, yards, and miles, which we don't have here, but we also use miles. These are customary, or part of the customary system of measure for length. So we're not talking about metric, so we're not talking about centimeters or kilometers or meters or anything. We'll talk about that in the next chapter. Today we are only using inches, feet, and yards. Now I want you to pull out this anchor chart that shows customary length at the top, and we're going to talk about it really quick because these show the different units that we are going to be looking at today. So first, we have inches. The way that they list these units of length is from the shortest to the longest. So we know as they go from the left to right, they get shorter, they get longer and longer. So the shortest customary unit of measurement is the inch. Pay attention to that abbreviation because you're going to be using a lot of abbreviations in this chapter. The abbreviation for inch is IN. We don't put any periods at the end. So 1 inch is about the length of the top of your finger. See, just the top, the top of your thumb. Not your whole thumb, just the top. That is about 1 inch. Now, next, we have a foot. Now, 1 foot, the abbreviation is FT with no period. 1 foot is, of course, the length of a ruler. We know that because we know when we use a ruler, we are looking at 1 foot. The next one is a yard. Yard is abbreviated as YD with no period. Oops. And it is the length of a yardstick. It is also the length of 3 feet, but we'll talk more about that tomorrow. You could put 3 rulers back to back to make a yardstick. Now, the longest customary unit of measurement of length is a mile, which the abbreviation is MI. 1 mile is like a driving distance. It's really long. I don't have anything in this room that is 1 mile long because it's really, really long. It's many, many, many feet. So think about it. If you want to go for a walk later today and calculate, use a phone or something with GPS to calculate a mile, that might help you to figure it out. So what you can do is you can use that phone with GPS or something, and you can walk 1 mile or half a mile, and then as soon as it says half a mile, you can come back and you will have walked a whole mile. So that will help you to understand how long a mile is. Okay, go ahead and put that away, and then, or put it to the side, and then put your finger or pencil on example 1. I know it's hard to read, but just make sure you're following along in the book. So example 1 says, the actual size of a neon damsel marine fish is shown. How long is this fish to the nearest inch, half inch, and quarter inch? So earlier we talked about the ruler and where the whole inch is. So we know from 0 to 1 is a whole inch, then from 1 to 2 is a whole inch. We also talked about how the half inch is this line right down the middle between there is no 0 on this ruler, but you can imagine the 0 and the 1. And then we talked about how the quarter inch is this longer line between the whole and the halfway point. And then we have 3/4, which is between the halfway point and the next whole number. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this fish that you have printed in your book, and we are going to measure it to the nearest inch, the nearest half inch, and the nearest 1/4 inch. Now, obviously, my measurements of my fish are going to be a lot different than yours. So I'm just going to demonstrate how to hold your ruler, and then I'm going to tell you what the length is in your book, because obviously mine is not going to be the same because it's massive and blown up on the board. So step 1, we're going to measure to the nearest inch. So we're going to compare the length of this fish to what we know about inches. Well, we know that an inch on a ruler is from one whole number to the next. So from 0 to 1 is 1 inch, from 1 to 2 is another inch, and so on. So as we go down, we're counting how many inches from 0. So here we're at 1 inch, now we're 2 inches from 0, 3 inches from 0, 4 inches from 0, and so on. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your ruler, find where the 0 is, or where that very first tick mark is if you don't have a 0. Line up that 0, or that very first tick mark, with the nose of your fish. Do not line up the edge of the ruler. Lining up the edge of the ruler is not where the 0 is. So find that very first tick mark. Some of you might have a 0, some of you might not. And line it up with the nose of the fish. Then you're going to look along here and find the closest whole inch. So you're finding the closest whole number to the edge of the fish. Now make sure you're looking for the closest. So if it comes between 2 whole numbers, don't just say it's the lower one. Look at which one it's closer to. Like, use your eyes to figure out, is it closer to is it closer to the 1 or the 2 or the 3? And in this case, in your book, it is closest to the 2-inch mark. So we are going to write the number 2 and then the abbreviation for inches, because we're going to be using a lot of abbreviations rather than the whole number. So the length of the neon damsel marine fish to the nearest inch is 2 inches. Now we're going to do the same thing with our ruler to figure out where it is to the nearest half inch. So, again, you are still going to line that 0, or that very first tick mark, up with the nose of your fish, and you're going to go straight across. Now, if I go straight across, I'm finding the nearest half inch. So that long tally, that's halfway between each whole number. So I'm looking for the closest one of these long lines that are right in the middle. And if I've lined it up correctly, it is closest to, it goes past the 1 inch, but it doesn't reach all the way to the 2 inch, and it is closest to 1 1/2 inches. So again, we have 1 1/2, and then we have the abbreviation for inches. Now, to figure out the 1/4 inches, we are going to look at the first or the third of these longer lines between the whole numbers. So, again, we're going to line the 0 or that very first tick mark up with the nose and measure straight across. And if we look straight across, we see that it comes between the 1 and the 2, and it is closer to that third tick mark than it is to the first tick mark, the first longer tick mark between. So that means to the nearest 1/4 inch, a neon damsel marine fish is 1 3/4 inches. So what you need to do for this lesson is you need to pay close attention to the whole numbers and which one it comes between. And let's see, I'm trying to get it so that it's not so blurry. This first long line between, the second long line between, and the third long line between each one. So this one, and this one. This one, and oops, I'm off. Whoops. This one, and this one between each line. So make sure you pay attention to that. You're figuring out which one it comes closest to. Now, let's look at this vocabulary down at the bottom. We finished number 1. Now let's look at the vocabulary. This is telling us more real-life objects that we can imagine when we're trying to imagine an inch, a foot, and a yard. So an inch is about the length of 1 paperclip. A foot is about the length of a textbook. So if you take your textbook, it's about a foot. It's not exactly a foot. That's why it says about the length. And then a yard is about the height of a chair. So those are what you can imagine when you're trying to imagine what an inch, a foot, and a yard looks like. Now a mile, you're just going to imagine, well, it's really long. Okay, go ahead and turn the page and let's look at example 2. Okay, finger or pencil on example 2. It is kind of hard to read on the screen, so make sure that you are looking at your book. This is another type of question that you are going to have in today's lesson in the independent practice and in the homework, where you have to figure out, you have to estimate the length of an object using the correct unit. So, we are going to choose the best estimate for the length of this caterpillar. Now, we're thinking about a real-life caterpillar. Is a real-life caterpillar more likely to be 2 inches, so 2 paper clips, 20 inches, 20 paper clips, 20 feet, 20 textbooks lined back to back, or 2 yards, which is if you took 2 chairs, laid them on the back, all the way across. Now, obviously, we have to think which one of those is more likely to be correct. And it's obviously going to be A, 2 inches. I don't know any caterpillar in the world that is the same length as like 20 paper clips put back together, or back to back. Maybe a snake, but not a caterpillar. Definitely none that are 20 textbooks. There's even rare, extremely rare for a snake. And definitely not 2 chairs placed on top of each other or side to side. So, because we know a caterpillar is small. So inches are better estimates than feet or yards. Since 20 inches is more than a foot, it's too big, and the best estimate is 2 inches. So you need to pay attention to what it's asking and what it's saying. And you need to imagine the object that they're asking about along with however many of those other objects we learned. So 2 paper clips, 20 paper clips, 20 textbooks, or 2 chairs. Imagine those things placed next to each other and which one would that object be closest to. Okay, let's go ahead and do the guided practice where we're going to have examples of both types of work you're going to have to do in this chapter. We are going in this independent practice and homework. Some of them you are going to be measuring. Some of them you are going to be choosing the best length estimate. Okay, so for numbers 1 and 2 on the guided practice, it says estimate, then measure each to the nearest inch, half inch, and quarter inch. So before you even get your ruler out to measure these, you are going to estimate, you're going to imagine how long is this. So think of it with inches or paper clips, textbooks or feet, and yards or chairs. Now the nice thing about these is they give you this line. So like that fish, we had to go from the nose to the tail to figure it out. Well here, we might not be sure. Do they want us to go from here to here, here to here, here to here, whatever. But this line helps us out a lot. So before we get out our ruler, let's estimate how long this butterfly is. I think it's about the length of 3 paper clips placed back to back. So my estimate is 3 inches. Now I'm not done because now I have to actually measure it to the nearest inch, half inch, and quarter inch. So now that I've made my estimate, so you're going to have 4 answers. Your estimate, your the nearest inch, the nearest half inch, and the nearest quarter inch. So I'm going to take my ruler. I'm going to line that 0 or that very first tick mark up with this first line right here. And then I'm going to make it go straight across this line and stop where this other one is. So here's my 0. Now yours is different, obviously, but you can see that in your book it starts on that 0 and it ends very close to that 3-inch mark. So our estimate of 3 inches was correct. this butterfly is about 3 inches. Now we're going to measure it to the nearest ½ inch. So that means we have to figure out that which middle line it is closest to, the line that is right in between the two whole numbers. So again, if I hold it up, line the 0 or that first tick mark up, go straight across. I see that that the end of the line comes between the 2 and the 3, and it is closest to the 2.5 inch mark. It is not anywhere near the 1.5 or the 3.5, but it's not far from the 2.5 inch mark. Now I'm going to do the same thing with quarters. Does it come closer to the first longer tick mark between two whole numbers, or the third longer tick mark between two whole numbers? And again, if I hold it up, line the 0 up, go straight across, I see that it comes closest to the 2 3/4 inch mark. It is not very close to the 2 1/4. It is not close to the 3 1/4. It is closest to the 2 3/4 inch mark. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing with these connecting cubes. We're looking at the length from the top to the bottom. Now first I'm going to estimate. I'd estimate that that's probably about the same as 2 paper clips. So my estimate, I'm going to draw a line there, is 2 inches. Now I'm going to actually measure to the nearest inch. So I hold it up, line the 0 up, make sure that you're putting it flat on your book, line the 0 up, and I see that it comes closest to the 2 inch mark rather than the 1 inch or the 3 inch mark. Now for the nearest ½ inch, when I hold it up and line it up correctly, I see that it comes closest to the 1.5 inch mark rather than the ½ inch or the 2.5 inch mark. Because remember, if it comes between 0 and 1, that would be the ½ inch, the 1/4, ½ inch, or 3/4 mark, there would be no whole number. Now for the 1/4 inch. If I line it up correctly, I see that it comes closest to the 1 3/4 inch mark rather than the 1 1/4 inch or the 2 1/4 inch mark. Now, just remember, like I said, just pay attention to the whole numbers, so these right here, 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 and here, and so on. And the 1/4 inch, which is the ½ inch, which comes right between each whole number. And the 1/4, which is the first tick mark after each whole number. And the 3/4, which is the last long tick mark between each whole number. This one's kind of cut down because those words are there, but it's right there and there. Okay, so pay attention to that in order to be able to measure. Now, number 3, we are choosing the best estimate for length. So we're looking at the length of a bicycle. Remember, whenever we look at these, we're thinking of the real life object, not the picture. So we're not estimating the length of this picture of a bicycle. We're estimating the length of an actual bicycle. When you have to measure, you're just measuring the size of the pictures. When you have to estimate, you're estimating the length of the actual object. So, is an actual bicycle about 12 inches or 12 paper clips placed back to back, 4 feet or 4 textbooks placed back to back, 12 feet or 12 textbooks placed back to back, or 4 yards, which is 4 chairs laid down and placed end to end. Now, obviously, a bicycle would not be 12 inches because that would only be this length. And there's no bicycle in the world that anybody could ride that is this size. So we know it can't be 12 inches. We know it can't be 4 yards because, again, there's no bicycle in the world that would be the length of 4 chairs placed on their backs, lined up end to end. So we know it either has to be 4 feet or 12 feet. Now, if we imagine 12 of our math textbooks placed back to back, that would probably stretch across a good, maybe like half of this room. Bicycles are not that long, so we know the best estimate is 4 feet. And if you imagine 4 of your textbooks placed back to back, even if you want to take 4 of your textbooks and place them back to back, you'll see that your bike or your parents' bike or whoever's bike is about the same length. Okay, so we're not going to do any of the independent practice together, but let's go through it really quick. Numbers 4 through 7, you're doing the same thing you did here, which means you need 4 answers for each. You need an estimate, you need the actual measurement to the nearest inch, the actual measurement to the nearest half inch, and the actual measurement to the nearest quarter inch. Do not forget units. You need IN for inches, FT for feet, YD for yards, and MI for miles. Now you'll only be using inches in numbers 4 through 7, but you might have to add more later on. Okay, then numbers 8 and 9. This is where we're choosing the best estimate. So you're thinking of an actual whistle and an actual chalkboard. Not these pictures, but an actual whistle and an actual chalkboard. So think, which one would fit the best? Then on the back for numbers 10 through 12, these are, let's see, they're word problems, so you need the answer and you need a unit. So some of these you may have to imagine it. You're going to have to put some things together. Some of them are reasoning. Is this enough? Is this correct? Whatever. So make sure that you fully answer the question. You need numbers and units where you need it. You need an explanation for some of them. And then some of them you may have to do a little adding. But if you think about it, you know exactly how to add with fractions. So and all of them are going to be like fractions that you're adding. So if you have to add, make sure you also have a equation. Number 13 and 14 are critical thinking, so you need to use your reasoning skills and your critical thinking skills. Think about what you learned in this chapter, think about what you know, put it together to create a new answer. For the homework, so everybody look at the homework. Numbers 1 and 2, you are doing like numbers 1 and 2 on the guided practice. Number 3 through 8, you are doing kind of like number 3 on the guided practice, but just with no numbers. You're thinking which unit would be best to measure these things. Like for number 3, I'll help you out at baseball. Would it be best to use inches, yards, feet, or inches, feet, or yards? Well, a baseball is like this size. It's not that big. So obviously you're not going to use feet to measure something that's only this big. And you're definitely not going to use yards, did it again, to measure something that's small. So inches would be the best estimate. Now numbers 9 through 11, you're doing like the independent practice. Numbers 10 through 12 on the independent practice. Make sure you have units if needed. And then numbers 12 through 14 are vocabulary. And then number 15 is like this. Okay, if you have any questions about today's lessons, make sure to reach out to me today. If it is, because I know you'll be taking your science test between 1 and 5. So if it is before or after 1, before 1 or after 5, just text me and I'll let you know if I'm available. I probably will be. I don't really do much. Even if it's just that I'm walking around the block with my dog, I can still answer FaceTimes. I think Skype too. I have it on my phone. So if you have any questions before 1 or after 5 because you're working on your test, just text me or call me and I'll let you know if I'm available. Okay, go ahead and get started on the independent practice. Then you can do the homework or you can wait until a little later.